about how English footballer Marcus Rashford has been campaigning for the UK government to be able to extend free school meals for the vulnerable children across the UK.
Thank you for that. Also joining us, we have Ashley Espiritu. What are you be reporting for us today, Ashley?
Hello, Giancarlo. Well, I have more news on the famous street artist Banksy parody recording more for 7.6 million.
Then we have a report by Jasmine Jamora from EBC Italy on Italy announcing a third emergency decree to control the spread of COVID-19. Also joining us, one of our live reporters, is Mian Glauser from Switzerland. Hello, Mian.
Hi, Giancarlo. I will be reporting about young INC members from Belgium, France, Monaco, and Switzerland attending a career day.
Okay, we look forward to that report. Thank you. For our EBC Sports Report, we report on how Lewis Hamilton has passed Michael Schumacher with a record 90-second Formula One Grand Prix win in Portugal. And we will end today's show, with, as always, with our view from our window. This time we'll be going to Frankfurt, also known as Manhattan. But first, our main news headlines. Coronavirus cases in England are now doubling every 9 days, official figures showed on Thursday, with the sharply increasing death toll piling pressure on the government to take national action. Another 310 deaths of those testing positives for the virus were reported on Wednesday, the second consecutive day of more than 300 fatalities. The upward trajectory of cases is now presenting a serious challenge to Prime Minister Boris Johnson's strategy of localized restrictions on the worst-hit areas. On October 25th, 128 people per 10,000 were infected in England, up from 60 on October 16, according to an ongoing study by the Imperial College London. The national R rate, which indicates the number of people one person with the virus is likely to infect, has risen now to 1.6. Prevalence was heightened in northern England, although rates were climbing across all age groups and all regions, according to the study. Earlier this year, Boris Johnson was criticized for his initial relaxed approach to the outbreak, even as the number of positive cases and deaths spiraled elsewhere in Europe. He eventually imposed a national lockdown in late March, shutting all non-essential shops and schools and forcing millions to work from home to cut transmission rates. The stay-at-home measures were lifted in June as cases dwindled, but as numbers spiked again from September, he has so far resisted calls for a second national lockdown. The government is reluctant to do so, given the damage the first did to the economy, triggering a wave of job losses and a severe dent in output. Instead, England has a 3-tier set of restrictions, depending on the rates of infection. But the newspapers have reported that government scientists now want stricter regulations, as they warn there could be 25,000 virus patients in hospital by the end of November. Many local leaders have resisted more stringent rules in their regions due to the devastating effect on the economy and concerns over the mental health of its residents. With many of the worst affected areas in northern England seats having Conservative Party won from Labour in the last election, Boris Johnson faces a difficult political balancing act. Some of his own members of parliament in the north are calling for him to give a clearer indication of how long restrictions will last. Britain is already the hardest hit country in Europe, with more than 45,000 fatalities of those testing positive for the disease. British soldiers on Sunday boarded an oil tanker off the coast of England and detained 7 suspects, the Defence Ministry has reported, after the crew were forced to take shelter from stowaways who threatened them. The alert was raised from the welfare of the crew of the Nave Andromeda tanker around 10 a.m. after they were forced to retreat to a safe area. In response to a police request, the Defence Secretary and Home Secretary authorized armed forces personnel to board a ship in the English Channel that was subject to suspected hijacking. Armed forces have gained control of the ship and 7 individuals have been detained, the ministry said, adding that the crew were safe and well. The British media said that the board was stormed by the Special Board Boat Service with 16 personnel boarding the Liberian registered tanker. Those arrested were reportedly Nigerian stowaways, a source on the Isle of Wight off the coast told the British newspapers. The captain clearly stated he feared for the lives of the crew and needed urgent assistance. They needed rescuing. It was desperation. You could hear the fear in their voices. The Defense Ministry said police investigations will now continue. In other news in Europe, the European Commission has announced the financing and purchases of rapid tests for 100 million euros. European Commission President sees rapid tests as playing a significant role in the handling of the COVID-19 in the region. They say that as Europe faces a second wave of the pandemic, it is important to have a better coordinated action on tracking and tracing viruses across the European Union. The rapid test for the coronavirus may not be considered as reliable as the PCR test, which requires a nasal swab, but European experts think that the region can no longer rely solely on tests that can take days for the results to come. The results of this test, on the other hand, can be available within 15 minutes. The EU has seen an exponential increase in daily cases in the recent weeks. France and Spain have both reached the grim 1 million milestone in terms of total cases, and they say that the figures are expected to increase furthermore over the next 2 to 3 weeks. By having these quicker tests, the EU will better know where cross-border patient care can be organized. Germany, for example, has already been receiving patients from Belgium and the Netherlands. To France now, where French President Emmanuel Macron announced on Wednesday the government's decision to put the whole country into a second national lockdown from October 30, and at least until December the 1st. The second wave of COVID-19 outbreaks is spreading across France at a speed that even most pessimists did not predict, according to President Macron. The recent measures in place, such as implementing a curfew for major hit cities and regions like Paris and Marseille, have not managed to contain the spread of the virus. On Wednesday, the virus had already claimed the lives of close to 35,000 people. Macron expressed that France the case elsewhere in Europe, is overwhelmed by a second wave and will probably be more difficult and deadlier than the first. On Wednesday alone, 244 new deaths and no less than 36,000 new cases were reported. Hospitals in the country have started to scramble for beds to accommodate more than 3,000 intensive care patients. Effective October 30th, people should be staying at home and can only leave home for justified reasons such as work or for medical reasons. Other lockdown rules include universities having to hold classes online, restaurants and other non-essential businesses having to close. As opposed to the first national lockdown, high schools will remain open, while visits to care home and funerals will be allowed. President Macron highlighted that the economy must not stop. Factories and farms can continue to operate, and public services will continue to function. He promised additional financial relief for businesses. The government will reevaluate the situation in 2 weeks' time. It's time for a break now, but please come back for more interesting stories from E&I UK and Europe edition.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Thank you for teaching us to serve with integrity.
Thank you also for inspiring us to tell stories from the heart.
On behalf of the EBC America team,
And from our family,
happy birthday po, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo.
On behalf of the Las Vegas Bureau, we want to wish Brother Eduardo V. Manalo a very happy birthday po. We love you so much and we thank you for everything that you do for us. We wish you the best of health, more success and victories for all of the endeavors of the Iglesia ni Cristo. Happy birthday po.
Hello po, Ka Eduardo V. Manalo po. We love you so much. On behalf of the EBC Seattle Bureau, we would like to greet you po a very happy birthday. The way you love us po, the way you lead us with such tireless intensity inspires us po every day to perform our duties. Thank you po and happy birthday.
Welcome back to ENI UK and Europe Edition. I'm Giancarlo Matera, now for more interesting stories from around the United Kingdom this week. A food bank in the UK has seen an increase in the number of families and children seeking help. We have Love Ann Season with us to give us some more details. Hello, Love Ann.
Hi, Giancarlo. So yes, that's correct. A food bank near London has seen the number of people coming for help double since the UK entered lockdown in March. Teachers are witnessing hungry children at school due to an increasing number of families that have been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the English footballer Marcus Rashford has been campaigning for the government to extend free school meals for vulnerable children over the school holidays, but the motion has been rejected by Conservative MPs in the Parliament, inciting many local councils and charities to take the relay. Manchester United striker Marcus Rashford has warned MPs not to turn a blind eye. The British government has so far refused to extend the provision of free school meals in England over the half-term and year-end breaks. Earlier, Rashford urged 3.4 million Twitter followers to lobby MPs to back his campaign. Rashford said that the pandemic had made the situation worse than it was at the start of the crisis. The number of children with little to no access to food has risen significantly. Now, the main opposition Labour Party's motion calls for the scheme to be extended over the school holidays until April next year. Over to you, Giancarlo.
Thank you, Love Ann. It's an interesting story. And how is the public responding to such a high-profile campaign that's been done by the Manchester United striker Marcus Rashford?
Well, for a start, a food bank manager said that he has done a fantastic job in exposing the issues because he has suffered and he experienced what it's like for a child to be hungry. And for most of us, that's something we can't begin to imagine, he said. Then there are also news that small businesses, charities, and community groups rallying to provide free school meals. So an example is Richmond Rugby Club, who ran a scheme providing meals for local children in the summer holidays. Now they continue the service because of Rashford's campaign. There's also the Red Cup Cafe in Harrow near London, who provides free school meals for children every day, while the charity Cooking Champions collects food from the Enfield community to redistribute them to those in need. So the amazing response from many groups and organizations has been very evident, and there are surely many others who are doing charitable works, especially during the pandemic, to support those who are in need. Giancarlo?
Thank you so much for that report, Love Ann.
Thank you, Giancarlo. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Love Ann Season, and we'll live in interesting time.
Okay, now we go to a modern take on Monet's Water Lily Pond by Banksy. For more on this story, we have Ashley Spiritu. Hello, Ashley.
Thank you, Giancarlo. An oil painting by British street artist Banksy parodying a Claude Monet masterpiece sold in London on Wednesday for £7.6 million, the second highest price at auction for the mysterious artist. The oil on canvas work Show Me the Monet, a modern take on Monet's impressionist classic The Water Lily Pond, sold for £7,551,600, equivalent to $9.8 million and €8.4 million at Sotheby's following a bidding battle. The hammer came down after 5 determined collectors battled for nearly 9 minutes to drive the final prize beyond its estimate of £3 million to £5 million to become the second highest prize for the artist at auction, Sotheby's said. The sale comes a year after a Banksy painting depicting the British Parliament populated by chimpanzees smashed the record for the street artist by fetching nearly £9.9 million. On that occasion, the 2009 work entitled Devolved Parliament attracted a 13-minute battle between 10 different bidders. Show Me the Monet was created in 2005 as part of a collection called The Crude Oils and had first been shown publicly in only Banksy's second gallery exhibition. The painting transforms Monet's masterpiece depicting a Japanese-style bridge in his famous garden into a modern-day fly-tipping spot. Instead of a lily pond, the composition shows discarded shopping trolleys and a fluorescent orange traffic cone floating in the water beneath the bridge. Let's listen in to Alex Brandzik, Sotheby's Head of Contemporary Art for Europe.
I think Banksy uses the auction houses, the galleries, just as he uses the streets. He says famously that, if a street artist moves from the streets into a gallery, he needs to paint over things that don't belong to him there either. And that's exactly what he's done in this case. I think most collectors today can see the irony in his work, the visual satire, and actually just the wit and the very sardonic flair. I mean, to me, I see him as a modern-day Voltaire in his ability to distill these very important concepts into a single, very strong, very powerful, very repeatable, very shareable image. Well, Devolved Parliament made just under £10 million, which is really an extraordinary sum for the artist. It was actually I think it was the highest value lot in the sale, alongside a painting by Jean-Michel Basquiat. It's got a long way to go from the estimate, but I think this work definitely has the quality and rarity and importance within Banksy's work to be achieving that sort of price level.
Banksy has become a household name since the turn of the century, after his iconic graffiti paintings began to appear overnight on buildings and in sites all around the world. The artist's identity remains shrouded in mystery even as his works have begun to attract increasingly high sums at auction. Meanwhile, he continues to use his art in stunts that generate huge publicity. In 2008, his Girl with the Balloon partially shredded itself as the hammer came down at Sotheby's, becoming the retitled Love is in the Bin. Back to you, Giancarlo.
Thank you for always reporting and keeping us up to date on Banksy's moves. But for those who may be new to watching us, could you briefly talk about Banksy and who he is and what he does?
Yes, of course, Giancarlo. Well, Banksy is a very popular anonymous street artist based in the UK. Although his identity remains a secret, his artwork continues to move and inspire people with the message behind the installation art, murals and paintings he mysteriously places in different parts of London and even in other parts of the world. During the London lockdown, he donated a painting to an NHS hospital that helped to raise money for patients and others in need of the coronavirus pandemic. Also, during the pandemic, Banksy's iconic rats image took display on the London Underground to promote the washing of hands and cleanliness during the pandemic. So Banksy is really an icon to the British eye as he helps promote awareness, politics, creativity, and charity work to help those in need. Giancarlo?
Thank you again, Ashley, for joining us this week.
I'm Ashley Spiritu, EBC correspondent from London, United Kingdom, and we live in interesting times.
Okay, it's time for another break now, but please come back for more E&I UK and Europe edition.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino.
Lumipat
Lipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to ENI UKN Europe Edition. Now for some more interesting stories from around Europe this week. Italy has implemented new measures to protect its economy and its population. We have Jasmine Jamora from our Milan Bureau who will give us our report. Let's play her report.
Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has announced the third emergency decree of the Italian government, tightening existing restrictions because of the coronavirus second wave in the country. As of Monday, October 26, Italy's restaurants and eateries had to stop serving indoors at 6 p.m. But food delivery services are allowed until 12 midnight. This remains valid until November 24. Gyms, cinemas, theaters, public games activities, and other open spaces are suspended. Classes in high schools and universities will be done 75% through distance learning to reduce the number of people in circulation and ease the pressure on public transport. The government has urged people to avoid unnecessary travel outside their hometowns and not to use public transport as much as possible. Prime Minister Conte said the measures were aimed at protecting the economy and people's health, and it was an imperative step to avoid a second full lockdown, which the country can no longer afford. Reporting from Milan, Italy, I am Jasmine Jamora, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Jasmine, for bringing us that report from Italy. With us today from Geneva, Switzerland is Mian Glauser on an online event where young members of the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ got to learn a fun way about different jobs and skills. Hello, Mian.
Hi, Giancarlo. So in this life, people constantly do their best to make good choices so they can have a bright future. One of them is the job they aspire to be, and this even from a very young age. Indeed, although they are still young and innocent, some children have already what we call a dream job, but some need more guidance. That's why, despite the pandemic, young members in the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ were able to join an activity called Career Day that was held through video conferencing in the countries of Belgium, France, Monaco, and Switzerland. During this activity, children from each congregation of these countries were able to share what they want to be in the future. But that's not all. Above all, they had the chance to listen to 8 speakers working or studying in different fields. They were a nurse, 2 accountants, a quality control analyst, a student in cinema, a law student, a chef, and a teacher. Each one of them briefly gave the children advices about their job and field. For example, what kind of tasks they are expected to fulfill, what they should like or not to do the job, and also what characteristics are required. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Mian. How did they manage to make this activity so fun for the kids to remain entertained while they were also learning at the same time?
Well, Giancarlo, each speaker prepared a game related to their job at the end of their presentation to make the activity interactive for the children. For example, the accountant asked them to do basic operations to show their math skills, Or for the cinema, they were asked to act by reading a replica. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you for your interesting story this week, Mia.
Thank you for having me, Giancarlo. I'm Ann Gloser reporting from Geneva, Switzerland, and we live in interesting times.
For our Ubc Sports Report today, Lewis Hamilton has become the Formula One's record all-time race winner last Sunday when he claimed the 92nd victory at the Portuguese Grand Prix to overtake Michael Schumacher at the top of the list. His win lifted him one clear of Schumacher's 14-year record of 91 triumphs after a thrilling inaugural F1 race at the Algarve International Circuit. "You are rewriting the history books," his Mercedes team told him over the team radio. Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff said simply, "92, Lewis, 92. Hamilton fought back after an early scare when he led but dropped to third after a rain shower to demonstrate impeccable tire management and flawless judgment as he claimed an 8th win in 12 races this year. The 6-time world champion finished 2.5 seconds clear of his Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas, with Red Bull's Max Verstappen in a familiar third place. Hamilton's triumph added another unprecedented feat to his roster of records. He now has the most wins, a record of 97 pole positions, a record 161 podium finishes, and a record 45 consecutive point finishes. The 35-year-old Briton extended his championship lead over Bottas to 77 points. A 7th world title, which would equal another of Schumacher's records, now looks all but inevitable, with only 5 races remaining this year. Charles Leclerc was 4th for Ferrari, ahead of a surging Pierre Gasly, after an excellent drive in his AlphaTauri. Carlos Sainz came home 6th for McLaren to beat Sergio Perez, who recovered from a first lap crash with Verstappen to finish 7th for Racing Point, ahead of the 2 Renaults of Esteban Ocon and Daniel Ricciardo. The 4-time champion Sebastian Vettel, in his final season racing for Ferrari, only managed to finish 10th. To end today's show, we go to our view from our window. This time it's in Frankfurt, Germany. This name is a combination of the word Main, the river that crosses Frankfurt, and Manhattan, referring to the high-rising buildings and skyscrapers that are located in the city center. This view was taken from the main tower, which has a viewing platform open to the public. It is 56 stories. It's a 56-story building and is 200 meters high. These videos are courtesy and thanks to Nanette Catalan from our EBC Germany Bureau. That's it from our show today. We hope you stay safe and keep positive. And we will continue to bring you more news stories from the United Kingdom and Europe. I'm Giancarlo Matera for EBC, and we live in interesting times.